But what I do know is that the Huffington Post, not usually a website that you're going to find on my web browser, but I did read them a couple of days ago. The Huffington Post put out an expose a couple of days ago on Kimbal Musk, America's favorite cowboy. Hey there, partner. Why don't you saddle up for this little bit of news here, Mr. Kimbal? Bill Maher once said in one of his comedy shows when he was talking about George W. Bush, he said he dresses like a cowboy, and as you know, there are no more cowboys, so what you're doing is wearing a costume. And that's what I think of. I mean, listen, I know guys that go out and actually fucking rope horses and shit for a living. I used to live out in West New York, man. There's a lot of fucking open space out there. There's people doing crazy shit out in the woods, especially out there in Tuscarora Indian Nation. Holy shit. I mean, so you got the closest thing to some real fucking cowboys out there. And I spent some time down south, too. I mean, you got some cowboys down there in Dothan, Alabama, the peanut capital of the world, and a couple places like that I've been to. But Kimbal Musk doesn't strike me as the old rough and tough cowboy. You know, nothing says cowboy like wearing a cowboy hat with a $398 plaid, cowboy replica shirt, courtesy of Urban Outfitters. The description is we use the inspiration of actual cowboys around the world to provide you with this slim fit lycra plaid cowboy replica shirt, which can be yours for only $398. He's that kind of cowboy. You know what I mean? I got some guys out here in the area where I live. I live in a kind of rural area outside of the city now. And there's some guys out here that roll into my local bar. I mean, there's people that I've seen out here for years. I have seen these people, and I've never seen them in clean clothes for as long as I've known them. And guys that do flooring, and guys that have farms and deal with horses. I mean, there's just dirt everywhere. Kimbal just kind of strikes me as the guy that, doesn't necessarily want to get dirt on those designer jeans. Regardless, Mr. Kimbal Musk, cowboy at large, hey there, partner. You're fucking quintessential Roy Rogers of 2020. The big KM, the big Kimbal. It reminds me of Don Imus. Don Imus used to wear a cowboy hat every day. And I know Don Imus had his own farm, the Imus Ranch or whatever it was called. Just leave the cowboy hat at home. Imus. And the guy can't even... Yeah, it's very unfortunate. I mean, elderly gentleman having difficulty probably getting in and out of his car. He's still got to wear the cowboy costume. He's going to go out and rope up a Bronco. I don't think so. All right, back to Kimbal Musk. The story in the Huffington Post seemed to indicate that Kimbal Musk's restaurants, I think they're called the Next Door restaurants, were caught robbing his employees. Apparently what had happened was he had asked his waitstaff, or maybe not him directly, but his chain of restaurants, had asked their waitstaff and their kitchen staff and the various other people, front of house, back of house, I'm familiar with all the positions. I've worked them all, dishwasher, salad station, line cook, grill cook, saute, waiter, host, bartender, I've done them all. Apparently he asked everybody at his restaurants if they would like to donate $2.50 per paycheck to contribute to an emergency fund that would be there for them if they needed money in an emergency, which is a lovely idea. For those of you that work in the restaurant industry anywhere but California, you understand that oftentimes you get a paycheck and it just says void on it or $0, because what happens ultimately in the restaurant industry, if you're not familiar, is as a waiter or a waitress, I think everywhere but California, you make basically $2.15 an hour, I think it was, when I was bartending. And then the cash tips that you claim and the credit card tips that you don't claim, but the computer claims for you, unfortunately, that taxes for those get subtracted from your paycheck. So oftentimes, if you're only getting paid $2 an hour, and you work a whole week, at the end of the week, you don't even have a paycheck because the money has already been deducted for taxes for the tips that you've made. On top of that, as if opening $0 paychecks wasn't insulting enough, Kimbal and his staff, I guess, had come up with this idea of donating $2.50 per paycheck to an emergency fund, which his staff sounded like they embraced based on several articles I read about it. One was in the Huffington Post, was the original one, and there were a couple of follow-ups, local follow-ups. And when the COVID-19 virus, the whatever you want to call it, Wuhan coronavirus, COVID, whatever mood we're in today, but when this pandemic happened and everybody had to stay home, and the next door restaurants furloughed a bunch of their employees and had to dial down operations, if not shut down completely. I'm not sure, I don't remember the full article off the top of my head. Many employees, some of which were laid off, apparently attempted to apply to get funds out of this emergency fund. And from what I remember of the article, they were kind of led in a circle. They were told to reapply a couple days later. They were told that the rules for applying for the grant would be different now. This was after some of them had been laid off and after the pandemic happened. After that shit happens, Kimbal's restaurant decides they're going to change the terms of the emergency fund. So after the emergency, that'd be like buying insurance on your car for, 16 years and never having an accident, and then you leave the car in the parking lot somewhere, somebody else backs into it, and you see it, and you got pictures, and you submit them to the insurance company, and the insurance company says, well, we're processing claims a little bit differently now. We forgot to tell you over the last 16 years while you were paying your premiums. That's what's going on here. So there was this whole outrage from his employees basically saying, where the fuck's our money now? And Kimbal, Mr. Big, I'm outside playing in the dirt, planting seeds type individual whose brother happens to be worth $22 or $23 billion, depending on where Tesla's stock happens to close that day. His brother, who's a billionaire, nobody comes in and bails out these employees, and nobody makes them whole. So the last that I heard about this story, his employees were just getting screwed. And that's the lesson I guess you learned from working for Kimbal Musk. Not a guy I would want to work for to begin with, but if you had the luxury of working for him now, he may not be on your short list of candidates for future employer. So I just thought that was lovely. Kimbal, pay the motherfuckers, all right? Go to your brother, tell him you fucked up. It's a PR disaster. You're making the Musk name look stupid. I mean, as if they needed any more bad press. Your brother came out and said the coronavirus panic was dumb and that it was going to be a non-event. Not sure if you noticed how that one worked out for the old Musk family name there, Kimbal, but not good. He was not quite an accurate prognostication, which is a nice way of saying he made a dick out of himself. Pay your employees, fuckface. That's your lesson for the day. Onward to other problems.